Hey everyone, I'm Carol L. Paur, spelled P-A-U-R, but it sounds like Power. Most people know me as a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and sister-in-law, but other people know me as an author with my most recent book, Early Summer. It's a YA mystery about a young woman struggling with anxiety who is obsessed with serial killers. When some young girls go missing, she goes on the hunt for the culprit. My other recent book is a Snora Snores? It's an early middle grade fantasy about snoring. I snore, so I thought I'd write a book about it. Actually, it is about a baby who has a strange malady, snoring that shatters glass and throws people into fits of hysterical laughter. It doesn't help that they live in a glass kingdom. That's why they get banished. Last month, we lost electricity like a whole bunch of people during that ice storm in Wisconsin. We also lost phone and internet service for over a week. And to top it off, my computer crashed. I had to take it to the Geek Squad. The hard drive was shot. I lost some software. And when I started reinstalling Power Director, that's the software I use for this podcast, I realized that I lost some of the images I used to use, like the dandelion image with the seeds flying in the air. For you new people out there, I did a segment once on my show about dandelions and how much I love them. So you can guess I was pretty bummed not to find that image. As you can see, I'm using just a plain dandelion. There are a few little seeds floating in the air, but the old image I had, they were actually moving with the picture. Also, the text is different. I had like a little box, and now it's a rectangle, and it's kind of moving. I don't love it, and it might change, but for now, this is as good as it gets. This month, I am excited to chat with Michele Regenold. She is a book coach for middle grade and young adult authors. Hello, Michele. Thank you for coming on Talking to Myself.
Carol, thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm really happy to be here.
Let's get started. Could you tell us why you became a writing coach?
I became a writing coach because I love stories, especially novels for kids and teens. I love figuring out what makes them tick. I love studying them and talking with other writers about them and helping other writers figure out how to make their work really shine, how to fix plot holes, how to find the right voice. All that kind of stuff is just so fascinating, and there's always more to learn about writing, which is another thing that appeals to me. As a coach, I'm constantly learning and improving my craft as well, so it's helping me as a writer too. But being able to help other writers is probably the most satisfying part, and maybe something I didn't expect that would benefit me and others from becoming a writing coach.
So, when did you begin this process of coaching writers and authors?
I opened my business as a book coach in January of 2022, and I got certified by Author Accelerator in summer of 2021. But I have been working with writers either as a teacher of writing at the college level or as an editor in a college working with professional writers for like 20 years.
A lot of people tell me they don't have time to write, even though they want to write a book or a short story. What are some ways they can fit writing into their schedules?
There are a couple fairly simple ways that authors can find time to write. One of them is to maybe adjust how they're thinking about writing, a perspective shift in a way. You don't necessarily need to set aside a chunk of 2, 3, 4 hours to write. If you've only got 15 minutes, then grab those 15 minutes. Start with little chunks like that. Another way is to actually schedule it on your calendar. And that way it's a commitment, like an appointment for yourself, just like a doctor's appointment or an appointment to take a kid to a sports activity. Prioritize yourself and your own work. And again, it doesn't have to be a lot of time initially. It's more about building that habit of showing up for yourself in your writing.
So, besides trying to find time, what are some other struggles writers have that you have identified?
One of the most common struggles that I see writers dealing with is not being able to see their own work clearly. I think that's something that we all deal with. We get so invested in our work and we've lived with it day in and day out for sometimes years. It's almost impossible, unless you set it aside for a good chunk of time, to see it with fresh eyes. And if you can't see it with fresh eyes, you can't see that the beginning, for example, maybe isn't really the beginning. Maybe you need to start it in a different place. Maybe the voice isn't working. Maybe your first person isn't compelling enough, so you need to try third person instead. It's really being able to see it is the most common struggle that I see with writers.
So, if someone was looking to be an author, what advice would you give him or her?
If you're a writer who wants to make a career out of writing novels, whether you can actually make a living at that or not, I think you need to develop really effective writing habits. And the most foundational one is showing up to your writing on a regular schedule. And that doesn't mean that you have to do it every day. It just means you have to do it regularly. It's kind of like going to work. If you've got a job, you don't just show up when you feel like it, when you're inspired to. You have to show up every day or whatever your schedule is. For me, creating a foundational writing habit that forced me to show up for an hour a day is what got me into the habit and able to finally finish a draft of a novel in a year or less. So setting that foundational habit in place at the beginning is something that you can then build on so you can develop your writing practice and make it work for you.
I think I read it on your website, I'm pretty sure. Something that's called shiny object syndrome. What is it, and how can an author or writer overcome it?
Shiny object syndrome is when you are in the middle of writing your novel and it's getting kind of tricky and maybe you're not having a good day and you don't know what happens next or why you even started this silly thing. And then you have this wonderful new idea that is so attractive, it becomes the shiny object that you want to pursue. Or in the world of the movie Up, the dog sees a squirrel and immediately is off to chase the squirrel. So how do you not go chasing after that new story idea? I think what you need to do is acknowledge that this is a great idea. Tell your internal editor, yeah, this is a nice idea. Write it down somewhere that you can keep it and come back to it. But you need to pay attention to your current work in progress. That needs your attention now. You'll come back to this new shiny object sometime later and see if you really want to pursue it. I think that acknowledgement is the one way to help you get over shiny object syndrome. It might not help you get back to the hard work in that particular moment, but give yourself, a nice pat on the back that you acknowledge that shiny object, but now you're going to go back to the work of your current work in progress.
So that's what that is when I'm working on a picture book and it just isn't going the way I want it. I want to write something else or look to something else or maybe order something online. So, one of my struggles as an author writer is knowing when to start pitching my work to either a publisher or to an agent. Oftentimes, I'll go through a couple rewrites, I'll run through beta readers, I even hire an editor. Um, and sometimes I'm afraid to send it out, or I think I rush to get it out. Do you have any guidelines or suggestions as to when is the best time to start pitching your work?
I wish I had a really great answer for this question. Unfortunately, I do not, because it's related to the whole ability to see your work clearly. If you have the time and can set your work aside for a while, and this is after you've completed at least one revision of it, and then go back after you've set it aside for a while so that it is cold, and take a look and say, you can't think of anything else that you could do to make this better, then that's the time then you could start sending it out to agents or publishers.
What is SMART and how can writers use it?
So it stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And so the way that can be helpful for writers is to divide up a big project like completing a middle grade or young adult novel into tiny little bite-sized pieces that you can accomplish. So for example, specific, I set a goal last October to complete a middle grade mystery novel involving animals by the end of March. I specifically wanted to create a second animal novel for my agent to pitch because the first novel she took on is also about an animal. I've done planning for it, I've interviewed my characters, and now I'm very close to wrapping up the first draft of it. So that was my specific goal. It's also measurable in the sense that I decided I would write 500 words or for 1 hour per day. Nice and quantitative. Now that might sound like way too much for you. Don't worry, that's something you can easily adjust for yourself. A SMART goal is also achievable. By breaking that work down, that big project down into small daily objectives, I know I can reach a goal of a novel that's 50 to 60,000 words long by the end of March. It was also realistic for me because I have written several novels before, so I know that I can get to the end of one. I've also been using a very thorough planning process, which is the same process that I use with writers I coach. It provides significant support, and market research that I've done shows me my concept is fun and has serious potential. It's also time-bound because, as I said, I have set a goal for myself of March 31st, 2023 as a deadline. That's not something I usually do. In fact, I don't think I've ever done that before, so that part freaks me out a little bit, but having a time-bound date is also motivating. I also suggest for writers that we add a why to the end of SMART and make these SMARTY goals, and the why stands for you-focused. Because since so much of publishing is outside of our control, we can only do what we can do. So in terms of this particular goal of completing a middle grade novel, completing a solid draft is within my abilities. That's something that I can handle myself. Selling it, that's outside of my control, but I can get to the end by myself. So choosing some big goal that you want and breaking it down into tiny little pieces that you can accomplish, and maybe thinking about a whole novel is still too big. Maybe you just want to think about, I just want to do chapter 1 and I can only work on it for 10 minutes a day. Well, still, in 10 minutes a day, I bet you could get through chapter 1 within 3 or 4 weeks. So that's how I would think about SMART goals and how they can help writers.
All right, so Michele, I really like that whole idea about what you can control in the writing process. Many people will say, I want to get a book published, or I have to find an agent. And those are not goals they have control over, right? Obviously, we all want to reach that pinnacle, but it makes more sense to say, I will write a book or a chapter and break this up to make it manageable. And I also really like the time bound. It's great to have all these dreams or ideas, but to say, this is when I need this done. Sometimes I give myself little rewards if I reach a certain milestone, and it helps me. It's just, what I do. You did just tell us that you took the SMART plan to write a book for middle grade, but could you tell us a little bit more about your own writing journey?
I've written several novels, but none of them have been published yet. The very first novel I wrote, I was in graduate school for a master's in English Lit, and I was taking a science fiction class and a Shakespeare class the same semester. And I think it was that semester when I started writing a Star Trek novel. Oh, it was terrible, but it was really, really fun. These days, though, I write middle grade fiction, and mostly middle grade fiction, I would say. I'm working on a mystery novel for kids. And I did land an agent last year, so I have made that leap at last.
Obviously, I brought Michele on because she is a book coach. And I think if you are struggling or if you are stuck somewhere, hiring a book coach, a professional book coach, is a great way to help you work through some of those issues. Michele, I can't help but ask, do you have any famous authors yet?
I expect to one day be able to talk about clients I've worked with who have published their books. But since I am still fairly early in my book coaching career, my authors haven't yet completed complete revisions or even complete first drafts in some cases. So I can't talk about publishing success yet. What I can talk about is their increased sense of confidence in their work. I have one client who has been working on a story idea for several years. She would use National Novel Writing Month as a way to churn out a new draft. She has no problem generating words, but she was really spinning her wheels in terms of finding a focus for her plot. So that's what we have been working on. She's got a nice, focused, compelling plot in place now, a nice plan, a nice outline, and she is now working toward getting a first draft of that done. Another client also came in with not a full draft of a novel yet, but a very complete sense of what the story was. The plot seemed to be in good shape to me, her plot outline. It was the voice of the story that didn't seem to really be working. And she was using a third-person narrator, which is interesting, but the character just didn't come across on the page the way she really needed to make kids want to read about her. So I suggested she try some first person. She did some journaling, and wow, her voice, that character's voice just popped off the page, and she's feeling so much better about that, and that is just turning out really well. She's making good progress. So it's that kind of day-to-day success that my clients are experiencing that I think will ultimately help them find the kind of outside success too. I think writing coaches or book coaches, however you want to call them, are probably here to stay with the way publishing is going these days. While there are more options for publishing, which I think is great, it's also more difficult, it feels like, to be traditionally published. So book coaches, we just offer, I think, another way for writers to get their work professionally examined, and help those. I, in particular, help dedicated writers who want to craft an exceptional middle grade or young adult novel. I'm really interested in helping writers who want to go the traditional route. I wish I could promise that any work writers do with me is going to help them get published, but of course I cannot, because all that stuff's outside of our control. But I can help writers really craft and hone their work so that they are proud of it and that it's ready to be submitted.
Wow, great stuff, Michele. Thank you so much for being our special guest for this month. And good luck with all your writing endeavors.
Carol, you are so welcome. I enjoyed it and I appreciated your time as well. Thanks.
That wraps up episode 24 with Michele Regenold. I hope you learned something. I did. Please share. Also, check out this month's blog called Typos Included. What do you think it's about? Yeah, you guessed it, typos. Typos are the bane of my existence. When I see one pop up in my work, it's a cringe moment. Actually, it usually ruins my entire day. So you might want to take a few minutes to read the blog to find out some tips to help you overcome what I call typo syndrome. All right, and my family will be celebrating the Triduum beginning April 6th to April 9th. What is the Triduum? It is when we walk with Christ on his final journey, beginning with the Last Supper, then his death on Good Friday, and finally his resurrection on Easter Sunday. The rest of the world seems to stop as we honor these important days of our faith. This Saturday, I'll be in Bishop Hill, Illinois, at an author fair. I am really excited. I'm going to be staying at a bed and breakfast, and it has some secrets in that bed and breakfast, so I'm kind of excited about that. And then on April 22nd, I will be at the Barnes & Noble in Wausau with other authors, so I'm really, really excited. Thank you so much for listening. I sure hope I get to meet you someday. Cheers.